Let's start with our top story coming out of Afghanistan. That country's Independent Election Commission has declared Ashraf Ghani the winner of last year's presidential election. But Chief Executive Abdullah has announced he's forming a parallel government. Vice President Rashid Dostum has also backed Abdullah's announced government. This report has the details.
The results of Afghan presidential election brought more confusion than stability to the already uncertain situation in the war-torn country. President Ashraf Ghani has been declared winner for the second time, with main rival Abdullah contesting the final results. According to the commission, Ghani got 50.6% of the vote while Abdullah got 39.52%.
I'm dedicating this victory of the people to the people. And as the first servants with our united team, we will always safeguard the rights of the Afghan people.
Calling the results an act of treason, Afghanistan's former chief executive announced he will form his own government.
Based on transparent and biometric votes, stability and convergence have won this election, and we announce our victory.
Other main rival and militant-turned-politician Gulbuddin Hikmatyar has not issued any statement yet on the results. Held on September 28, the polls were marred by low turnout, allegations of rigging, widespread voter fraud and violence.
In Indian-occupied Kashmir, occupying troops have martyred 3 more civilians in the Pulwama district. The civilians were targeted during a cordon and search operation in the Tral area of the district. 26 unarmed Kashmiri civilians have been martyred by Indian troops over the past 2 months. Meanwhile, scheduled local panchayat elections in the occupied valley have been cancelled after overwhelming rejection by Kashmiris. Elections were set to be held on over 11,000 seats in the valley on March 5th. All major Indian political parties, including the Congress, National Conference and People's Democratic Party, have already boycotted the polls. The party said there is no point of contesting the polls when all top Kashmiri leadership is under arrest by the BJP government. UK MP Debbie Abrahams, chair of the All-Parties Parliamentary Group on Kashmir, and other MPs have met Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi. Both sides discussed the current crisis in occupied Kashmir under Indian clampdown for the last 6 months. During the meeting, Qureshi praised the group's voice for occupied Kashmir, saying Islamabad appreciates its 2018 report highlighting Indian atrocities. Qureshi said Pakistan looks forward to the All-Parties Parliamentary Group on Kashmir's visit to the Azad Jammu and Kashmir. The group is visiting Pakistan a day after its chairperson, Abrahams, was barred from entering India by the government there. Strongly criticizing the BJP government's move, the MP said India treated her like a criminal and took her to the deportee cell. Debbie Abrahams had written to the Indian envoy in the UK expressing concern over India's illegal annexation of occupied Kashmir. Meanwhile, Indian authorities have registered a case against countless internet users employing proxy servers to avoid a social media ban in occupied Kashmir. Police said they have misused social media to propagate a secessionist ideology. They added that the internet users could be charged under a law which allows the government to designate them terrorists. The valley has been under a communications blackout since August 2019, when India stripped the region of its autonomy. The tight internet restrictions in occupied Kashmir have been slammed by rights activists worldwide. In a related development, the jailed ex-chief minister of occupied Kashmir, Mehbooba Mufti's daughter, Iltija Mufti, says Indian brutalities are pushing Kashmiris towards Pakistan. Mufti has become one of the loudest voices for the 8 million Kashmiris imprisoned in a curfew by New Delhi since August 5th. In an interview, she said there is a lot of anger among Kashmiris at Indian atrocities, which have increased after the illegal annexation. Slamming the lockdown by the BJP government, Mufti said the clampdown has led to an economic, psychological and emotional crisis. She said Indian forces are monitoring the internet usage of Kashmiri youth and imposing controversial laws. New Delhi has imposed a total curfew and communications blackout in the valley for the last 199 days. Expressing dissatisfaction over U.S.-India trade ties, President Donald Trump says New Delhi has not treated Washington very well. The statement comes as Trump prepares to visit India next week. Speaking to media in Washington, Trump said he is not sure whether a U.S.-India trade deal will be signed before the November elections. During the visit, New Delhi is set to buy $2.6 billion worth of military helicopters from U.S. firm Lockheed Martin. Expressing concern over that deal, Pakistan said this agreement will further destabilize the volatile region. In a statement, the Foreign Office said the international community is fully aware of India's aggressive policies against Pakistan. Anti-Citizenship Act protesters in India have refused to quit until the withdrawal of the law. The Indian government has been facing countrywide demonstrations, rallies and sit-ins for the last 3 months. Carrying on the sit-in, Shaheen Bagh protesters in New Delhi have started a makeshift school to continue education unhindered. Organizers of the school said they are doing this for protesting mothers so their children can learn as the sit-in continues. Meanwhile, a massive rally against the law has been held in Chennai, in southern state of Tamil Nadu. Over 15,000 people took part in that rally, demanding the withdrawal of the act immediately. In a related development, the UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has expressed deep concern over the discrimination against Muslims in India. In an interview, the UN chief conveyed apprehensions over the Modi government's controversial Citizenship Act. The UN Secretary-General said he is concerned there is a risk of statelessness for 2 million Muslims excluded by the divisive act. Guterres said it is pertinent whenever nationality laws are changed, efforts are taken to avoid statelessness. Discussing the reports of human rights violations in occupied Kashmir, he said these must be taken seriously. The UN chief said these reports have clarified exactly what is happening in Kashmir under the Indian-imposed clampdown. Let's now get to some other news. The UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres has also called for an immediate ceasefire in northwest Syria. In a statement, he expressed alarm at the rapid deterioration of the humanitarian situation in Idlib. The UN Secretary-General said the only path to stability is a credible and inclusive UN-enabled political solution. The Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said Moscow will ensure terrorist positions in Idlib are completely eradicated. U.S. President Donald Trump said his Turkish counterpart Tayyip Erdogan is trying to avert a humanitarian tragedy in Idlib.
He's fighting on Idlib. He doesn't want people to be killed by the thousands and hundreds of thousands. And he called me about that and other reasons. But we spoke about Idlib, and we're working together on seeing what can be done.
A UN report says nearly 900,000 Syrians have been displaced by recent clashes. The Arab League has urged Lebanon's new government to meet the demands of its people protesting against the economic crisis. Secretary General Ahmed Abul Ghait said Beirut should carry out economic reforms to restore the confidence of the international community. He said the Lebanese government should make arrangements to open the way for international aid and to attract investment. Ghait's remarks came during his meeting in Cairo with the United Nations Special Coordinator for Lebanon, Jan Kubis. The Secretary General and Kubis discussed the most important developments and Beirut's prominent challenges. Lebanon is in need of economic reform to prevent its already dire economy from deteriorating further. The UN envoy to Yemen, Martin Griffiths, says peace efforts are at risk of collapsing as violence is escalating in the country. In a briefing to the Security Council, Griffiths said the fighting between belligerents broke out in January after months of relative calm. The envoy said the situation in Yemen has only grown worse, with both sides announcing expansive military goals. Griffiths said Houthi rebels and government forces have each given reassurances of their interest in a peaceful political solution, but their current actions contradict their claims. Yemen has been stuck in violence and chaos since 2014, when rebelling Houthis overran much of the country, including the capital, Sana'a. The UN says tens of thousands of Yemenis have been killed since then, while another 14 million are at risk of starvation. Libya's internationally recognized government has suspended its involvement in ceasefire negotiations hosted by the UN in Geneva. The announcement followed an attack by forces loyal to Khalifa Haftar on the port of Tripoli, which killed 3 people and injured 5 others. The port authority said the massive material losses from the attack paralyzed maritime traffic. In a statement, the Presidential Council of the Government of National Accord said it will respond firmly to the attack. The UN envoy to Libya, Ghassan Salameh, called the seaport attack a big breach of the ceasefire. The attack happened as 5 military representatives, each from the GNA and Haftar's forces, gathered in Geneva for negotiations. Elsewhere, the death toll from the new coronavirus in China has now passed the 2,000 mark, with 136 more people dying over the past 24 hours. Over 1,700 people have been infected overnight, bringing the total number of people affected by the disease to 75,000. China's National Health Commission says for the first time, the number of recovered patients was greater than the number of new cases reported. Meanwhile, Hong Kong has reported its 2nd death from the new coronavirus. Elsewhere, the first passengers have begun disembarking from the virus-hit cruise ship moored off Yokohama, Japan, after 14 days of quarantine. More than 540 people on board have been infected with the coronavirus, the most outside of China. The U.S. has named 5 state-run Chinese media entities as foreign missions, calling them a propaganda news apparatus. The U.S. State Department says the status will affect Xinhua News Agency, China Global Television Network, China Radio International, and 2 newspapers. Each media outlet will now need to register the locations of any property they own or rent in the U.S. The organizations will also have to obtain permission to acquire more property and to disclose the identity of any employee working in the U.S., including American citizens. During the Cold War, most Soviet media organizations operating in the U.S. were classified as foreign missions. More recently, the Vietnam News Agency was named by the State Department as a foreign mission. I'll be back after this break with plenty more news. Stay tuned. Welcome back. The United States has imposed sanctions on a Swiss subsidiary of the Russian state-controlled oil giant Rosneft over its key role in Venezuela. The U.S. Treasury Department has targeted Rosneft Trading SA and Rosneft Vice President Didier Casimiro for helping sell Venezuelan oil despite sanctions. The move is part of Washington's attempts to increase international pressure on Venezuela's leftist President Nicolas Maduro. This report has the details.
Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro has held on to power despite a crumbling economy under crippling U.S. sanctions and mounting diplomatic pressure. Rosneft Trading is the largest target of Washington's anger because it works with the Venezuelan state oil company to commercialize the country's crude oil. The U.S. has accused Russia and Rosneft Trading of helping in the repression of Venezuela's people by propping up Maduro.
While Venezuela is undergoing the crisis it is undergoing, the humanitarian crisis, the economic crisis, what is Russia doing? Siphoning money out, not giving aid, siphoning money out, $800 million to Rosneft. That's not even the Russian state, which also gets money.
The sanctions will block any assets of Rosneft coming through the U.S. It criminalizes any transactions involving those assets within U.S. jurisdiction. Russia has called it a U.S. attempt to bend the world to its will, undermining global commercial freedom. But Venezuela's own opposition leader Juan Guaido has endorsed the U.S. announcement.
On the contrary, the invitation is for all companies to side with the Constitution and who don't want to finance a dictatorship or to use a company to pass penalties to criminal groups and financiers of terrorism. Today, Maduro finances terrorists. So not only has this company been sanctioned today, but all those who continue to sustain a dictatorship must know that there are consequences for terrorism.
Venezuela's Foreign Affairs Minister Jorge Ariaza said US sanctions are aimed against the country's oil industry, its workers, and economy. Ariaza said his country will denounce the sanctions at the International Criminal Court as possible crimes against humanity.
12 people have died from an outbreak of dengue fever in Peru, while over 5,000 cases have been reported nationwide so far this year. Authorities have declared a health emergency in Madre de Dios, Loreto, and San Martin, where over 4,000 cases have been reported. The World Health Organization says dengue is one of the top 10 global public health threats. Peru's health ministry says this dengue variant is different from the ones in Mexico and Asia. Seven people have been killed and 11 injured when a passenger vehicle exploded on a highway in southeast Colombia. Officials say the explosion happened in a key drug trafficking region where illegal armed groups are wrestling for control. Authorities said the blast hit two other vehicles and forced them off the road, injuring those inside. Dissidents of the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, National Liberation Army guerrillas, and drug traffickers are said to be fighting for control of the area. Colombia's Defense Minister Carlos Holmes Trujillo said the vehicle was possibly carrying explosives.
The main hypothesis, according to the inquiries of the Attorney General of the nation, would be associated with an accidental explosion resulting from the illegal transport of explosives. These explosives would have as a destination the execution of terrorist actions or for use in illegal mining.
The production of cocoa leaves and cocaine fueled conflict in the region, which has left over 260,000 people dead and millions displaced over the past 50 years. The United Nations says no single country is adequately protecting children's health, their environment, or their futures. A landmark report by a commission of over 40 health experts finds every child and adolescent is under immediate threat.
The report, published in The Lancet, ranks the performance of 180 countries on child survival, education, and nutrition rates. Under this criteria, less developed states such as the Central African Republic and Chad perform poorly compared to rich countries. But the rankings are largely reversed when the impact of air pollution from carbon emissions is assessed. Excessive emissions by wealthier nations burden children with additional dangers, from deadly heat waves to the increased spread of tropical disease. The report also highlights the threat children face from harmful marketing of fat and sugar-laden foods, alcohol, and tobacco.
On to France now, where many villages are struggling to hold on to local businesses in an era of e-commerce and out-of-town shopping malls. More than 1 in every 2 communes is without a village shop. An international company has taken an initiative to resuscitate the local cafes in villages. More in this report.
Thomas Suro wants to breathe life back into a small corner of the forgotten French village of Congrières. The decline in Congrières' fortunes have been mirrored across rural France, where empty properties and vacant storefronts tell the story of a slow business decline.
It is people from the village who asked us to open a business because a cafe is a place where people can talk and everything. The residents of Congrières have asked.
Okay, we're just going to go into the business news now. In fact, the European Union has added Britain's Cayman Islands to its tax havens blacklist. It has joined Oman, Fiji, and Vanuatu on the list of states accused of failing to crack down on tax abuse. The EU said the Cayman Islands have no income tax, capital gains tax, or corporation tax laws in place. It said the Cayman Islands allows firms to register despite having minimal presence in the territory. The EU said Georgetown was previously added to a grey list, giving time to introduce new laws to tackle lax tax rules. European Commission Vice President Valdis Dombrovskis said blacklisted territories face reputational damage and risk losing EU funds.
First, there are, of course, reputational consequences, because being blacklisted by the EU clearly is a signal about the problems in tax governance in those jurisdictions. In addition, at the EU level, the EU list is linked to the EU funding under specific provisions.
Meanwhile, European stocks are trading higher as investors respond to fresh economic data and China's measures against the new coronavirus. Investor sentiment continues to be volatile, though, as major stocks lose stability. London's FTSE 100 is trading nearly 1% higher as oil stocks Shell and BP edge up. Frankfurt's DAX and CAC 40 in Paris have gained nearly 0.5%. In Asia, Nikkei 225 gained nearly 1%, shedding yesterday's losses due to weak economic data. The Shanghai Composite ended a three-day winning streak, closing fractionally lower amid fears over the spreading coronavirus. Meanwhile, international crude oil price shed early gains to close over 0.5% higher. Time now to find out what the weather is like around the world. And with that, you're all caught up. Thank you for watching this bulletin here on Indus News.